I have that, and then I've also sort of recognized it in nations, and the and I think you were quite right. You put it down to two kids,
It
you
really
know,
is.
two kids there. And I did a series of books before I did the Ray Kazena series. It was called a Future History series. And I did them 20 plus years ago now. One was called Dragon Strike, uh, which was about America and China having a war. And then the other one was called Dragon Fire, which was India, Pakistan, and China. And when that came out, it was outselling Harry Potter in India. So that was a thing. And then the last one was called the Third World War. And one of the things that I did with the great editor that first commissioned them, he said, don't do too much on personal characters. We want to see what the countries are because the nations are characters themselves. And we've just reissued the series. And Third World War came out in 2003 or 4 originally, so it's 20 years old. Is it 20? 22 years old. And those nations in it, the main nations are China, Russia, India, and the US. And the UK, I have to put a bit of the UK in. But those nations are acting in the same way that they're acting today. It is what they are. It's what their culture is, whether it's religion or history or the way they eat or how they live or whatever. Countries have always acted in a certain way, and that's what they do. And this is why when people talk about the present American administration, I said, no, you might talk about one guy, but actually, what that guy is representing is that nation at that particular point in time.
It's
You know,
true.
and then another guy, somebody else is going to come in 10 years from now and will temper down everything a bit, and then it'll go up again, down again, up again. We've had 7 prime ministers in 10 years or something in Britain, so I know what I'm talking about when it comes to this sort of thing.
I would say so, absolutely. Now, do you actually live in Britain, or are you here in the States? Am I allowed to ask that? Feel free to
Yeah,
tell me. That's none of my
I'm
business.
I'm talking to you from London.
Okay, okay.
I'm
I
talking.
wasn't sure.
Yeah, I'm talking to you from London, where the newspapers are full of our royal family at the moment, and
Yes.
um, and all of that sort of stuff. And I've lived in London and on the east coast of England for all my, apart from when I was in Asia. So I was my first posting for the BBC was in Sri Lanka. There was a Tamil civil war going on there in Sri Lanka at the time, and that was in the late 80s. And I went out to cover that, and that taught me something about government and democracy. In that, and then I flipped those thoughts right through to when I went to cover Iraq and Afghanistan and all that sort of thing. And that's this, so is that when we, the British, we decolonized like instantly. We want to do this instant stuff like we did in Iraq. We went in there an instant. So, so instantly we decolonized, then we put in this thing that's called democracy, and people vote. But in Sri Lanka, they had a majority Sinhalese population, they were Buddhist Sinhalese, and a minority Tamil Hindu population. And at that stage of the sort of government development, people vote by religion and ethnicity. And I think we get that less here. You get it a bit in the States when you talk about the Hispanic vote and the black vote and the whatever vote. But there it's absolute. So so we handed over a system whereby one group would become the dominant group. That was the Buddhist Sinhalese. They would always run the government. The Tamils would never be able to do anything about that. And then, of course, in politics, the more extreme a person is, the more popular they tend to become. So the more extreme the Sinhala Buddhist people were, was they had to be extreme against the Tamil population, and then the Tamils rebelled and started blowing up, and that war lasted 25 years. 25 years, and you think, how on earth? Why on earth did we do it like that? You know.